Warm welcome to viewers in New York, the Akwa State capital, and from around the world. This is Worldview. My name is Xavier Robert, and on our top stories today, Volodymyr Zelensky planning to join G7 summit in Japan in bid to secure strengthened support ahead of a planned counteroffensive in Ukraine war. Authorities in Iran execute 3 men sentenced to death in connection with nationwide anti-government protests last year. More than 1 million people displaced by 5 weeks of fighting in Sudan. Details of these stories and more in a moment. First, on Worldview today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has attended an Arab League summit in Saudi Arabia to seek support for his country in the face of Russia's invasion, as Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman expressed his readiness to mediate in the war between Moscow and Kiev. Speaking at the event today, Zelensky, in his trademark green military-inspired outfit, told the audience that he hoped most of them are there for the sake of peace and justice. Zelensky then added that he wanted to leave a noble call to all to help protect its people, including the Ukrainian Muslim community. Zelensky further highlighted the importance of Ukraine's economic and educational ties with the Arab world. Meanwhile, Zelensky is planning to join the G7 summit in Japan, according to reports, in a bid to secure strengthened support ahead of a planned counteroffensive in the Ukraine war. The Ukrainian president is expected to arrive in Hiroshima on Sunday, although his office has not confirmed the visit. Russia and an announcement of further sanctions. A group of 7 nations made up of the US, UK, France, Italy, Germany, Canada, and Japan represent the world's richest democracies. This year, 8 other countries, including Australia and India, have also been invited. Zelensky had been slated to appear at the summit by video link, but speculation has been rife that he or his wife, who recently visited South Korea, would attend in person. Ukraine, it could pose a potential risk to his safety. But the calculation is that the risk is worth taking if it means securing even more help in his fight against Russia. Elsewhere, officials say the U.S. Department of Defense overestimated the value of weapons and others sent to Kiev. In many of the military aid packages sent to Ukraine, the Defense Department opted to draw from existing U.S. stockpiles of older existing items because it should ship them more quickly, according to officials. Now, the accounting error was the result of assigning a higher than warranted value on older weaponry that was taken from those existing stocks. Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh said during its regular oversight process of presidential drawdown packages, the department discovered inconsistencies in equipment valuation for Ukraine. In some cases, replacement cost rather than net book value was used, therefore overestimating the value of the equipment drawn down will be. Media cited a U.S. defense official who said the amount of overvalued weaponry could possibly grow beyond $3 billion as the Pentagon examines the situation more thoroughly. The result may mean that the Defense Department will have more available funds to send to Ukraine as a much-anticipated offensive against Russian forces nears. Saying, the Pentagon spokeswoman said the accounting error had not constrained U.S. support to Ukraine or hampered the ability to send aid to the battlefield. Away from that, protesters held banners saying, open quote, "You are not welcome," close quote, to barred them from standing outside the airport arrivals hall. The Azimuth Airlines plane arrived days after getting the green light from Georgia's Civil Aviation Authority. Georgia's government has welcomed the return of direct flights from Russia. The government argues 1 million ethnic Georgian citizens living in Russia stand to benefit although Russian figures suggest the number is closer to 114,000. But most Georgians' aspirations to join the EU. Georgia is hoping for Brussels to approve its bid to become a candidate later this year. In a separate development, authorities in Iran have executed 3 men sentenced to death in connection with the nationwide anti-government protests last year. This is according to the judiciary. The 3 were convicted over their subjected to unfair trials and allegedly tortured. 4 other protesters have been hanged since December, and dozens more have reportedly been sentenced to death or charged with capital offenses. The protests swept across the Islamic Republic following the death in custody of Mahsa Amini, aged 22, a Kurdish woman who was detained by morality police in Tehran in September for allegedly wearing her hijab improperly. The 3 who were executed, Majid Kazemi, aged 30, Saleh Mirashemi, aged 36, and Saeed, paramilitary force members and a police officer, were shot dead. In Syria, President Bashar al-Assad is attending an Arab League summit for the first time since it was suspended from the regional body 12 years ago. Assad was shunned by many fellow leaders after his government's violent crackdown on pro-democracy protests triggered a civil war in which 500,000 people have been killed. Syria was readmitted this month after states which had backed the opposition accept the earthquake that hit Turkey and northwestern Syria in February, when once hostile powers decided to send humanitarian aid to Syrian government-controlled areas. China also brokered a surprise agreement in March that saw Saudi Arabia restore diplomatic ties with its longtime regional rival Iran, which along with Russia has helped Assad's forces regain control of Syria's biggest cities. Large parts of the country are nevertheless still held by Turkish-backed rebels, jihadists and Kurdish-led militia fighters supported by the United States. Half of Syria's pre-war population of 20 abroad. An elderly Australian woman with dementia is in hospital with life-threatening injuries after being tasered by police at a care home. Officers were called to Yallambee Lodge in Cromer, New South Wales, NSW, after reports that 95-year-old Claire Noland was carrying a knife. The early morning incident has sparked outcry over what advocates say was a disproportionate response. The New South Wales Police Chief has said an investigation is underway. Now, Assistant Police Commissioner Peter Coulter told media today that Noland was found armed in the morning. 2 officers and care home staff tried to de-escalate the situation before she began approaching police. It is fair, according to them, to say at a slow pace and was tasered. He said she had a walking frame, but she had a knife. A family friend, Andrew, bleed. Away from that, more than 1 million people have been displaced by 5 weeks of fighting in Sudan, including 250,000 refugees, according to the United Nations Refugee Agency. Now, Sudan has been gripped by violence since April 15, when the Dagalo escalated into an armed conflict. Hundreds of people have been killed in the battles that have turned the streets of the capital Khartoum and other places across the country into war zones. Speaking to reporters in Geneva today, a spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, Matthew Saltmarsh, said 843,000, mostly into Egypt, Chad, Ethiopia and South Sudan. Saltmarsh said, adding that Egypt has so far received the highest number of Sudanese refugees, about 110,000. The UN said on Wednesday that half of Sudan's population needs humanitarian aid, and more than $3 billion will be needed this year alone to provide urgent assistance inside the country and to those fleeing across its borders. In Italy, ex-Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi has been discharged from a hospital in Milan, where he was admitted more than 6 weeks ago on Friday without making any comments. Italian media showed footage and pictures of Berlusconi being driven away in a dark limousine, smiling and waving to reporters waiting outside the hospital shortly after 1 p.m. Belashoni was admitted on April 5 and spent the first week and a half in intensive care before being moved to a normal ward. Although he rarely appeared, a junior partner in Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's coalition government, Meloni visited him in hospital on Sunday, saying afterwards he had been in an excellent mood and was still working tirelessly. After the break, a wildfire in the western Spanish region of extreme efforts to bring it under control. So stay with us for details on this and more right after the break. Many thanks for staying tuned. Now, assailants killed 3 rangers and another member of their convoy in an ambush in the volatile east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This is according to the Congo Institute for Nature Conservation, ICCN. The attackers struck on Thursday as the convoy, escorted by ICCN rangers, left Kivandia village near Virunga National Park, which is home to half the global population of endangered mountain gorillas and the scene of frequent militia attacks. The 4th victim was one of the technical workers implementing a project to support communities around Virunga, ICCN said in a statement late Thursday. A further 6 people were wounded. According to ICCN, Virunga has been caught in the middle of militia activity that has destabilized the surrounding South Kivu province since civil wars were fought around the turn of the century. The ICCN warned of a resurgence of violence in February after suspected Mai militants attacked a ranger position in Virunga, killing 1 person and injuring 2. The eastern DRC has been plagued by fighting by at least 122 rebel groups, according to a recent count by the United Nations, for more than 25 years. Away from that, a wildfire forced 550 people from their homes with windy weather, complicating efforts to bring it under control. According to emergency services, a commander of the military emergency unit, David Barona, told State TV Channel today there are very strong gusts of wind, generating a speed and progress that make efforts to extinguish it difficult. With Portugal, authorities have ordered the evacuation of as many as 550 people in the villages of Cadalso, de Camaria, and Robledilo de Gada. Natural causes sparked the fire, according to authorities. An unusually dry winter across parts of southern Europe, coming after 3 years of below hectares in Spain last year, according to the European Forest Fire Information System. And well, tsunami warnings have been lifted following a magnitude 7.7 earthquake that struck beneath the Pacific Ocean southeast of New Caledonia. The major quake was detected at a depth of 37 kilometers, the U.S. Geological Survey said today, and countries across the Pacific issued alerts. Nakel, a port town in the island nation of Vanuatu. Smaller waves were measured elsewhere of Vanuatu and off New Caledonia. Vanuatu's National Disaster Management Office had earlier advised people to evacuate from coastal areas to higher ground, according to an information bulletin alert. New Caledonia, where police have evacuated the coast and tsunami sirens were activated, also lifted its alert later in the day. Australia's Bureau of Meteorology said there was no tsunami threat to mainland Australia, but Lord Howe Island, located 780 kilometers nautical miles northeast of Sydney in the Tasman Sea, was under a threat warning. Now, at least 54 people were killed and more than 185,000 buildings damaged by Myanmar cyclone Mocha, which swept into the country's northwest last week. Tight control over information mean the actual extent of casualties and destruction remains unclear. People living in the area have told media that hundreds of probably died. Damage was significant and widespread, and that they were still waiting for help to arrive. The powerful cyclone roared in from the Bay of Bengal on Sunday in southern Bangladesh. It weakened to a tropical depression on Monday as it moved inland. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said the destruction of homes and infrastructure was widespread in Rakhine. Elsewhere, Lebanon's Ministry of Justice has received an Interpol notice issued for Central Bank Governor RIAD SALAMEH, according to the country's caretaker Interior Minister. This go out to law enforcement agencies around the world, and they seek the location and arrest of fugitives wanted for prosecution or to serve prison sentences. The notice for Salameh was issued after France put out an arrest warrant for him as part of its investigation into whether the governor embezzled hundreds of millions of dollars in public funds, an allegation he denies. Salameh slammed the French move, calling it a violation of the law, and promised to appeal. Well, as the results of Turkey's presidential election trickled in, many opposition supporters took to social media to express their anger, directing much of it at voters living in areas devastated by February's earthquakes. Sunday's election ended with the majority of voters in 8 of 11 cities affected by the earthquakes cast their ballots for Erdogan's Justice and Development Party, while the other 3 cities favored Kılıçdaroğlu's Republican People's Party. In the wake of the quake, Erdogan's government was criticized for its slow initial response to the disaster and lax enforcement of building codes. 3 months later, the president's critics could not understand why earthquake survivors would support Erdogan at the ballot box. Many used Twitter to lob insults at these voters. And with that, we wrap up our package for you on Worldview today. Do ensure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtv.ng. You have been watching Worldview on Spectrum TV. My name is Xavier Robert. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.